Hey there, boys and girls. Welcome back to Vassals of Kingsgrave, great linear Song of Ice and Fire reread. And yes, you're hearing this correctly. Surprise, motherfuckers! I've been granted hosting powers for this episode because 9 other people and Barley's baby all declined. This is a special episode 90 of the reread, as we are doing a wrap-up of Feast for Crows. I'm Matt number 2, Blue Armor on the forums, and most of the people joining me here today are from the previous reread episode. We kind of all enjoyed our discussion so much that we decided to keep it going and do this Feast wrap-up after all. So first up, joining me are linear reread stalwarts. We got Michael.
Hey, Khal, Wadege on the forums.
And Jock.
Hello, Jock. Hello, Jock here on the forums.
And then 2 gentlemen who are somewhat more unpredictable with their appearances, but it's always great to have them on. We got Noah.
Hey guys, Pops AA on the forums.
And Wilson.
Hey guys, Wilson. Wandering Prophet on the forums.
And finally, one of our fearless leaders, we have Bina.
Hey everyone, Bina 007.
So yeah, like I said, this is a Feast wrap-up mainly, but kind of because of how intertwined Feast Dance is, I'm sure our discussion will tangent from time to time, as is Vox wont. There should be no reason to discuss the show in this episode, but Wynn's sample chapters are always fair game to me, so we'll try to give you a heads up beforehand, but I think it's likely that kind of Sansa and Arianne's chapters will be brought up towards the end of the cast. So I wanted to start off with kind of a quick rundown of everyone's experience with Feast, because I feel that opinions of the novel kind of, and your first impressions of it kind of vary depending on the context in which you first read it, and also if you're anything like me, they've kind of, changed over time. I've kind of reached somewhat of a Zen-like state where the flaws of the novel don't really bother me that much as much as they did when I first read it. But I know there are like a few members of VOC, I think like John and Amin, who actually did have to experience that 5-year wait between Storm and Feast. But I don't think anyone here had that, right?
No.
Yeah.
No, sir.
Yeah, that's what I thought. For me, I got into books pretty much right when Feast came out, so I went straight through all 4 and then had the 5-year gap, or was it 5 year, 6 year? I think until Dance came out. Yeah, or no, it was 6 because it was 2005 to 2011.
Okay.
So 6-year gap. So kind of I don't know. My first impressions of Feast, it was definitely a little slower, obviously, than Storm. But yeah, because I went straight through from 1 to 4, it wasn't too much of a deal. I know I didn't like the cliffhangers at the end, and some of the early stuff in the novel is a little bit slow. But it wasn't too bad. It was, it's kind of just probably the wait for Dance that was the most negative aspect of it, and then it didn't, and then Dance didn't kind of reach the end point we wanted it to. So that's probably the more disappointing aspect. Also I at least knew going into Feast that it was split. So I was somewhat expecting of a cliffhanger, although perhaps not to the extreme that George did. So what are your all kind of first experiences with Feast?
Well, I read the books back to back, I think after the show came out. So I was going into Feast knowing I was ahead of the show because I think I'd watched it. It was in between season 3 and 4. And so I was excited going into Feast. Later on, of course, rereads later and talking to people who read it. I can understand I don't want to use the word disappointment, but people feel it was less exciting than the other books. I enjoyed it tremendously. In fact, it moved me along and got me ready for, Dance and where things kind of left off before the shows took things over. So I enjoyed it very much. I learned plenty about the characters. The world grew for me because up until then it was mostly Westeros, but I think in Feast, some characters go down to Essos, and besides Dany, of course, he was always there, but it just, for me, the love of the books or the love of this world kind of grew because I'd learned new things, met new characters, and the story kind of moved along for me. So I was happy with Feast.
Yeah, so I started reading in, I think, 2011 after season one. So I think A Dance with Dragons was actually out, but for whatever reason, either I was bad at finding it or Australia was slow to import A Dance. I only read Dance of Dragons in 2012, so I had a waiting period of several months, which is honestly nothing. So I didn't, yeah. When I look at other people's reactions to how, I don't know, disappointed they were with Feast, I'm not feeling it. I can certainly see that there were some pacing problems, but I think a lot of the frustration I had was channeled into Dance.
I see.
I mean, I think Feast has less like fat on it when compared to Dance. Like, you know, when I go back and really like look as to see, you know, what I would cut out of Feast, there actually isn't much. I feel like the only like problem chapters are, you know, some of the early Brienne ones, the Dornish ones, just kind of because of those early POVs. The Eris Oakheart POV really doesn't work for me. And then maybe you can cut out some stuff from Cersei, but I still don't think it's as much. Whereas with Dance, like all the big three that all have like 15 chapters of Dany, Tyrion, and Jon, like I just think there's a lot more like unnecessary fat on that novel as well, like when compared to Feast. And then Feast like still had room, at least in terms of printing, you know, being able to physically publish the book. Like there's still leftover space that he could have added more stuff to it, or, you know, put some of the stuff from Dance into it had he had the power of 2020 hindsight.
Yeah.
Yeah, certainly Dance is the book that needs the biggest edit, not
Yeah.
Feast.
Yeah, and it's at the end of the day, it probably came down to time, where, you know, he'd finally gotten something publishable, and they probably just, you know, forced him to just put it out. I mean, it only went through like 6 months of editing, like max.
Yeah. So the footnotes or the author's notes in the book where George talks about, or at the end, where he talks about having this massive book and then thinking about chopping it in half, and then you have Feast and Dance, but instead he just took the characters wholesale and separated their stories so that we had two different books that at least, you know, made some progress in the story. Do you think it would have been better if you had all the characters like together in Feast? Because Feast does work with Dance if you read them either back to back, because you kind of see some of the events overlapping. Otherwise, it's just I don't know. I don't know what the weight was between Feast and Dance, but I didn't experience that weight. I just read them both, so I never felt like there was anything missing, or you know, the book didn't feel complete to me. It felt like the stories moved, you know, the story moved along for most of the characters anyway, even though they didn't necessarily interact. I could see where at least it was going, so it wasn't so bad.
I think lacking all three of the main characters, if you want to call them that, is a bit of emptiness in Feast. And I think George's decision to put the characters he put in Feast might have been motivated by what was easiest to write and what was done, so that could go in a book. And again, as you say, that's like good from a publishing perspective, but not necessarily good from a story perspective. So I think if we had one of these three central characters, it might not have felt so, I don't know what the word is, minor. Yeah, because I would say there's two types of emptiness you feel in Feast. One is the death of like these central stabilizing characters like Tywin, Robb, and Catelyn, and that's obviously intentional. Yeah. All these secondary characters have to step up and see how they fare. So that's again what George was intending. And then the second kind of emptiness is just lacking these main characters that we've come to expect, and that is not what George was wanting. That's more of an artifact of his weird publishing style.
Indeed.
Yeah, no, I was actually gonna like save this discussion for the very end, as to kind of like how, you know, what were your opinions on like how you would, you know, fix these two books in retrospect, or, you know, how you would structure them to be to come to a more satisfying conclusion. But yeah, because I never. It wasn't until recently that I thought about what would happen if you just include all the POVs and then just split it up in terms of chronologically or his version of chronologically. Obviously, the books skip around depending on the POV.
Yeah.
But I feel like the one issue with that is because the pace slows down so much. Like if you included all of the characters into Feast, would there be like any climactic moment at the end, depending on like what's the stopping, like what's the halfway point that you would like put in there to be a climactic moment? I think ideally that would have been possible if you kind of released both books at once, or within less than a year span of one another, and just saying like the next two books are one giant book. They'll be this book will kind of just stop halfway through, and the next one will be out in a few months or a year or something, and then Dance ends with the two battles. Like I think maybe that would have worked. Maybe that could have worked, but it would have taken too long to do that. Like his writing process was too slow to really pull that off.
Well, would the mayonnaise plot be such a problem if he had done it with all the characters in Feast? Wouldn't keeping the timings like be easier?
Like I don't see how it could be easier, because I feel like that's why Dany and Tyrion are in Dance, was because that part was such an issue for him. So I don't know that it would have changed anything. Like I think it still would have taken that much time to write that section of it.
I would consider doing a geographic separation, like all the characters in Westeros versus all the characters in Essos, which I would need to go review how many.
But isn't that what he
chapters.
thinks he did? Because
that's what he thinks he did, but Feast for Crows doesn't have Jon Snow in it.
Yeah, but he thinks that geographically it was all the people basically in King's Landing versus, and sort of the bulk, the England of Great Britain, so to say, of the people in Westeros. And then Dance was all the people in the north, and then Essos. So I think he thinks he did do it geographically.
I would say do it properly geographically, and again, not what was just easiest to do first. Because I would, again, all of the North shenanigans, that I would put that all together with the King's Landing stuff, with Jon Snow, with the Iron Islands, and then everything else. You could maybe even chuck Dawn
but
as
everything
Essos,
else,
considering how it's othered. But again, I would need to review this. This is just an idea.
So Dance would just be basically Jon and Dany. Sorry, it would it would just be Dany and Tyrion. There'd be hardly anything in it, unless you throw in sort of Quentyn and Arianne and Dawn.
Tyrion, Quentyn, yeah. Well, Quentyn is on his journey to Essos. All of his chapters take place in Essos. Victarion's chapters happen in Essos. John Connington. Sam, I would actually take Sam and put his chapters in A Dance of the Dragons, because most of them are foreign, or they take place outside of Westeros, kind of, sort of. I would need to, review if you have a high enough page count to make that work, but it's an idea.
To me, the geographic split isn't the issue with the books. The issue with the books is the delay between the two, and then the fact that Dance wasn't edited, so it was very baggy. I think people wouldn't have minded the split if Dance had been tighter and sooner. Sorry, Wilson.
Oh no, that's a good point. I was going to ask how storylines, like just thinking of Dorne, for example, I think the excitement with Arianne's story was the consequences that Quentyn's journey would have on her role in Dorne, and how that would affect Marcella, and then affect Cersei. So that kind of the sequence of events, not knowing, I think maybe made that storyline more I guess exciting to read, or relevant, especially when some of the revelations that are revealed by her father are very. I mean, I think not knowing what was happening with Quentyn at the time made that exciting. But you're right. I think splitting it geographically and having them move side by side. And I don't know when Feast. I don't know how long afterwards Dance was released from Feast, but again, I read them back to back, so I didn't feel the wait. But if you had chopped like both books in half and had to wait a while, I don't know what that would have felt like. Or maybe it wouldn't have been an issue.
I think it would have been worse. Yeah, I mean, I could see a couple points. I think one of the issues with putting Jon in Feast is that you would have ended on his. Yeah, you would have ended on his death, and then you wouldn't get an answer on that for 15 years at this point. We're approaching that. So right. So it would been, it's 2000. Feast came out in 2005. It's now 2019. So we would be sitting on Jon's death for that long, and that would be even worse. I do think that probably the Dornish chapters would work better with, well combined with Dany's chapters in Dance. And then there would have been a way to structure that, which would take out the early Quentin. Like, you could have just had the normal Dorne POV chapters, and then once Princess in the Tower hits, that's when you then cut to the introduction of Quentin, like essentially arriving to Dany's court, and so that would have like cut out a couple of early chapters too.
Just less Quentin is what you're saying.
And I don't even mind Quentin that much, but like, I actually like his chapters because there aren't many of them, and they don't take up that much space. There's other stuff I would cut first, but it's just it's one of those things that you could do. Yeah, I think I think the easiest way to solve it with the least amount of changes is basically just make sure that the dance ends with the two battles. And there's definitely stuff you can cut from the big three in Dance, and you can cut a little bit of stuff in Feast as well. You could also easily include Bran's chapters in Feast, because there are only 3 of them and they're not tied to anything else. Whereas, stuff like Davos's chapters kind of need to be with some of the other northern stuff to work. And so I think just, doing that, he might have been able to pull it off, where Dance ends with the 2 battles, and then you can just consider that the 2 books as one. And it would work really well. I mean, there would still be the issue of the weight, but
there are nice things that happen by means of the way he separated it, though. Like, I think the contrast between Sam and Jon, and getting the same events from 2 different perspectives and realizing how slow Sam is to figure out some stuff is kind of interesting in George's defense. There are certain narrative and dramatic irony aspects which I would miss. I'm really happy with Feast Dance as they are. I think Dance could have been more concise. The Brienne chapters could have been a bit more concise in Feast, but overall, I don't hate them. And maybe that's because when I read them, I didn't do the wait for Feast, but I did do the wait for Dance. But I feel that Feast was fine for me. Like, I didn't hate not having Tyrion and Jon, because my favourite characters were all in Feast. So I got Jaime, Cersei, Sansa, and as minor characters, I got people like Brienne. So, I was never the Tyrion fangirl, and Dany I can take or leave. So it was all fine. And Jon again, I'd got Sam, so I was fine.
Well, that's good.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Go ahead, Mike. Oh, that's not. Yeah. No. Yeah. No, I agree. Because Jaime, Cersei, Sansa, Arya are all in Feast, and they're great.
And big amounts of plot, right? I mean, this isn't just discursive rambling around the hinterlands. I mean, major stuff happens to Sansa. We can get into it, but I feel these are very plot-heavy, character development-heavy books. Big things happen to Jaime. Big things happen to Cersei. So I was incredibly happy.
Yeah, I think all could have been forgiven with a smaller weight. Like, really, now that we have Feast and Dance together, they synthesize as one big book a lot better. And I'm just tired of waiting.
He just had too many POVs. It's a lot to juggle, and it's maybe why it's taking him so long now, because he's said he's not going to have any new POVs, right?
And he's going to start killing a lot.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So but then that's probably kind of maybe written himself into a corner there, because people will die and he does need fresh POVs.
I don't think he necessarily needs any new POVs to complete his story, unless maybe you count Hal and Reed. But I see someone else seeing Hal and Reed. We won't have access to his mind.
Yeah. He seems like he's pretty good. Like, he seems like he's pretty well set up with, having someone everywhere he needs them to be.
And the story is, after all, condensing and coalescing, isn't it? So I just think in general he needs less POVs as the characters move together.
Right, exactly. You have multiple POVs in one location, so that you don't have to. You can just switch between them, and so they'll have less overall.
He's just by himself. He can see everything.
Before we descend into another George Wallow, shall we get into some of the characters or plot points of the book?
Yeah. I was waiting.
Yeah.
I was waiting to move into that.
We just descend into this like melancholy silence.
I do love this book.
Contemplating life.
Great.
Yeah. Without Game of Thrones.
Let's jump into specifics. What worked for you, what didn't in this book. We'll try to focus on the more positive stuff. Anyone who wants to start, go for it.
Well, do we maybe want to do it by character or by location? I don't know how people want to tackle it.
Like, everyone was wondering what's inside her crazy head, and well, we found out it's batshit crazy.
Yeah, and she's kind of the driving force of the novel, as she's the only one really left in King's Landing dealing with the political stuff that was kind of the highlights of the first three books between with Tyrion and Ned and Tywin and all that.
Well, true,
yeah, she is the last one standing.
Well, standing might be a strong word to define her abilities in King's Landing. She's very, that's a character I struggle with, Cersei. Like, you want to hate her, then you want to like her, and then she gives you every reason to do, either of the two. I tried to sympathize with her when I saw the danger, or at least the book tried to express the danger to her position with the Tyrells plotting and with Littlefinger, talking about how he expects her to destroy herself. But then she turns around and does like the stupidest thing, like alienating her uncle and, being very proud about dissing powerful lords. I don't know how to feel with Cersei, And Feast didn't help that. Even when, the worst happened to her, my feelings for the character didn't change as much. It just was like, oh, this is big for King's Landing and the way things stand. But for Cersei as a character, I don't know if Feast did any good for her. I wonder what you guys think.
Again, I would say like the real climax comes in Dance when she does her walk, which I would view as sort of the culmination of all her Feast arc. But no, I really did enjoy going into Cersei's mind and seeing how she operated, and seeing how unlikable she truly was. I thought it's a very interesting exploration of like a character you just loathe, but also feel bits of pity for, and then keep loathing again. It's interesting reading Cersei, how your emotions progress with her.
Yeah, I can understand, like, Catelyn Stark. I've heard people talk about her and how if she does anything bad or if she falters, it's because of her love for her family and so forth. I tried to see if that was even sort of the case with Cersei, but even as a kid, she was a bit of a jerk, because it's like she's almost unredeemable. And now in the situation she's in, I mean, someone who is less caught up in their own, I don't know, not opinions, but maybe biases about the world, would seek alliances, or at least be smart about letting other people in. Cersei does the opposite and just like makes things worse for herself and for other people because she's Cersei. But yeah, I don't know, dude. She's not the easiest one to try to like,
Yeah, but I think it's also the point. She's another example, I think, of George being really smart of when he introduces a character as a POV. I think kind of his decision to wait on characters like Cersei, Jaime, and Brienne, and not make them POVs right away. I think he does a good job as picking his spot as to when they should become a POV and when they're, about to go through some real character development. And so I don't think we're necessarily supposed to like Cersei. Obviously, it's kind of just a fun Schadenfreude type glee in watching her spiral down. At least that's how I like reading it. It's just kind of bring her in now, and then it's all this book is just kind of the story of her downfall. Culminating with the walk.
Well, that's true. You figure, when a character gets a POV, we want to learn something about their psyche and why they do things, how they reason out their their decisions. But you're right. Maybe she's just there to give us perspective, but not necessarily help us understand her motives or anything better. But that's how I feel about Cersei.
I mean, it certainly helps us, sympathize with her more than we did in the earlier novels, where she's just a kind of a villain antagonist type character.
That's true.
She's almost a cipher in the first 3 books. It can be very hard to figure out what is motivating her in the first 3.
We got to see her from other people's point of view in the first 3, from Ned Stark, from Tyrion, and all of them kind of painted, a harsh picture of Cersei. I guess because they were the object of her disdain or whatnot. But seeing things from her point of view, she truly did hate these people for reasons that were, like she hated Ned Stark because she just thought he was a fool. She hated Catelyn because, not because, but she would say things like, he should have smothered Jon Snow in his sleep if she were half as brave as she should have been. Now she's leaving me to do it. It just shows her ways of thinking are rooted in some kind of malice with Cersei, indeed. So with Feast, it's more like a confirmation of her, I don't want to say evil or maniacal, but malevolent sort of thinking or ways. It's like a confirmation, she truly is out for blood, and the only people she could ever care about are her 3 kids, not even Jaime, because he was just I don't know. But, Feast did that for Cersei. And in Dance, I thought maybe, redemption coming, but it doesn't look so.
Right, but, it also gives you the context of, nature versus nurture. It's never one or the other. It's always both.
Yeah,
and so she definitely does have kind of the natural malice to her. But what Feast does is also show her the nurture and what she's had to deal with and growing up in a patriarchal society, and how she kind of just consistently grated against that. And so that led her to kind of her full commit into the person she became today in Feast. So you get both sides of it, and I think it's a good development and exploration.
I enjoyed reading about the trauma of growing up with a twin who's an opposite gender, and when they would have those little moments where they'd switch clothes, and she could not understand why she's getting treated so differently from this person that she views as her clone.
It's true, yeah. In fact, reading that along with Brienne's own experiences about growing up in that kind of society, it's very enlightening, I tell you. It's same gender, but very different experiences, very harsh, very brutal, compared to, the other gender. That was eye-opening.
Yeah, and it's a good contrast where they both faced similar issues, and yet made different choices and therefore became different people, at the end of it. So it's a good contrast in the novel.
I also liked Cersei's chapters because we got to see Marjorie in some greater detail. I've always been amused by some people who say that Marjorie is a cipher and they could never really understand her in the books, because to me, at least, if you're reading A Feast of Crows and you see how Marjorie interacts with Cersei, I think a lot of her personality is evident.
Well, that's true. We're seeing her from Cersei's point of view, indeed. Would it be different if she were a POV? I don't know if it would have been valuable to have Marjorie as a POV in King's Landing as an observer who was never there from the beginning, just to see how things were. Or do we get that from a different character I think Cersei's our only King's Landing POV, right?
Yes. I mean, Jaime's there for a little bit, but not for long.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we do get more of Marjorie in this novel, but I still feel like we're missing something. I still feel like there's a key component to her character that we've never really been given.
Which is what?
And I don't know. I just feel like there's a key. I don't know. I guess I just want her to have some sort of unique underlying motivation that we haven't seen yet.
I think her motivation is, I don't know, I find Cersei quite sympathetic, actually. Back in the day when Vassals of Kingsgrave first began, we did feast dance recaps where we just read the character chapters all in order and talked about the character, and I actually volunteered for Cersei, which no one else was going to do. And I find her quite sympathetic. I think she's a woman who is smart, not as smart as she thinks she is, but she's smart. And she recognises that in this world, as a woman, she's going to have to play a certain role, which leads you to subservience and sexual exploitation. And she's angry about that. She's angry about the fact that no matter how many times her brothers fuck up, the father is always going to give them certain positions in the small council or whatever, because they are, after all, men. And that no one gives her the respect she feels she deserves. And she's angry. She's just an angry, vengeful woman. And I think if you understand her as someone who isn't, I mean, she can be petty too, and jealous and envious and all those sorts of things. But ultimately, she thinks that she has been denied a power that is rightfully hers, having been brought up with all this chat about Lannisters. And she exercises whatever power she can through manipulation and other petty forms, because she's trying to somehow gain the respect of her father, who ultimately is never going to give her remotely the same respect that he gives Jaime, even though Jaime has disappointed him, become celibate, can't continue the family line, and Tyrion is a drunken whoremonger. I kind of get that. I get why Cersei's angry. She is the ultimate character with penis envy. She really is. For me, anyway.
Yeah. I wonder,
No,
Go ahead.
No, that's on you. I was just going to say I agree with all that.
Yeah, I was going to ask if anyone truly in King's Landing, if anyone is kind of like on her side. Like it seems she's very mistrustful of everyone, because everyone who's around her now just wants something. Even the Merryweather lady who eventually ends up in her bed just kind of wants. They all want something from her. And I think there's a line in the book that says she learned mistrust at her father's knee. And I don't know if that kind of explains, or at least gives some insight as to how much Cersei learned or valued Tywin, and maybe she is resentful at the lack of reciprocity that she gives. I mean, he loves her, I think, but then he has no qualms about marrying her off to people for the sake of the family, or using her for this and that. So maybe that does explain. And you're right, Bina. She is angry and has a right to be so, given all that's happened from day one. I am hoping that she gets some kind of redemption in some way, at least. Like, I hope her character doesn't blaze out without any moment of just quiet solace and maybe some kind of peace. 'Cause from the beginning, she's fighting. Yeah, she's fighting everyone that we love, Ned Stark, and even Jaime. This thing with Jaime was kind of sad, because at least we all thought that was the one person who had her back, because he was always trying to get back to her and be with her. And now with this revelation with the Kettle Blacks, I think she's lost him, and she knows she has when she realizes he's not coming to save her. So I hope it works out for Cersei.
I think I'll find it problematic and I love Jaime, literally. I had a conversation with my fiance, where I said to him, I've been in love with Jaime far longer than I've known you, let alone loved you. And that will always be the case. But so I love Jaime, and I'm very pleased he gets a great redemption arc. But I think it will be problematic for me if by the end of this book series, Cersei has not been afforded that same opportunity. Maybe not to take it. Maybe she's just too blind with rage and alcohol and resentment and revenge seeking now against the faith to take it. But I think it would be unfair if she started off as a sort of bitter, twisted bitch and stayed that way to the end. It would feel like, how come Jaime has this chance of redemption and she doesn't? And maybe it's because he met Brienne and she never met that person who could afford her that same transformation. But because I would love to see Cersei evolve. I find it bizarre that a character can go through as much as she's gone through and not change in any way. It's almost unrealistic. And George writes such interestingly nuanced, evolving women, Arya, Sansa, even Cat through the books. They all evolve. So if Cersei doesn't, then I'm going to find that difficult. And similarly with Dany, actually. With both of those characters, I've got slight concerns about what goes on with them going forward.
Concerns are right, yeah. I agree. I'm concerned too.
Yeah, but I also think I also think we've hit the point in the novels where we'll see that change, because they both go through something at the end of Dance, with her with the walk, and Dany with the flying on the dragon and then running into Dothraki. So I think we're at that point where you're gonna see that in wins.
I agree. I don't understand how you go through the Walk of Shame or what Dany went through in the wilderness without being fundamentally altered, and maybe for the worse, right? I mean, it's not necessarily for the best. So I don't need them to evolve better. I need them to evolve. I need George to show me that they're gonna move in some way, because I think, in a sense, of all the major characters, Cersei is one of those that has maybe become more extreme, but she hasn't changed in the way that most of the other major characters have gone through quite a lot of change by now in their personalities and attitudes and maturity.
Yeah, I mean, well, I feel like that's why he waited so long to introduce her as a POV, because it was because she wasn't gonna go through a significant change until after this moment.
She would have been too static as a character.
Yeah.
Yeah. Same with Jaime. Like he would have been too static until he lost his hand. So, I expect maybe with Cersei, if it goes the way we think, and Tommen and Marcella die, I imagine we could get a quiet moment of reflection and solace for her, in like one chapter. But then I expect her to attempt to go out in a blaze of glory.
I think evolution, being as what you want, you'll get evolution, just not redemption. Maybe. I think she will definitely become the absolute evil queen with nothing to hold her back.
And that's okay. That's fine. Yeah. But all I would say is we've had many apparently evil men in this series, including, Jaime apparently start pushing a kid to his death, apparently. Theon. We've seen some dramatic transformations. I mean, don't get me wrong, we've seen characters like Ramsay who don't change. I would want to see one of the evil villains who is a woman in this piece transform. We'll see.
What do you think? Do you think after the Walk of Shame she'll become less erratic? Or
I would hope she's so bizarre. I don't think she'll become good. I think I hope.
No.
I hope for her that she becomes Tywin, i.e., literally and metaphorically sober, and start to exert power, for her own selfish ends. So not a good character by any means, but in a more wise, mature, sophisticated manner. I would hope that she would truly become Tywin's heir at that point. Although SJ Lee's not going to be screaming that Tywin's not that clever anyway. But do you know what I mean? I would hope that the cognitive dissonance between who she perceives she is and the respect she deserves and how she acts closes in the next book.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, mainly just to see more cold rationality from her, rather than just pure erratic emotionality that's too stereotypical, and what we see, men's argument in this world of why women shouldn't be rulers. Well, men's argument in our world of why women shouldn't be rulers.
Sorry, go ahead. I was just going to say, I like this quote about Cersei. The longer Cersei waits, the angrier she'll become, and anger makes her stupid. I much prefer angry and stupid to composed and cunning. And I think we'll see. This is Tyrion, by the way. Sorry. I think composed and cunning Cersei would be very interesting to read.
Absolutely, especially if Tyrion comes back and is also composed and cunning, but on the opposing side. So a Tyrion versus Cersei, both at the absolute top of their game, I think would be really brilliant to read.
I don't think. Well, we'll get. I mean, maybe we shouldn't talk about Tyrion, but I don't think he'll reach the heights that he did in Clash or Storm.
He's just too maimed by what he's been through.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that.
I think that might be his transformation.
Yeah, like the opposite. Cold and calculating Tyrion now becomes like Death Wish Tyrion, who doesn't care anymore. That might be it. Tyrion. I was going to say I would welcome a very cunning Cersei. In fact,
so like playing as his he.
Oh, yeah, similar to how Jaime becomes the Kingslayer that everyone thinks he is, Tyrion becomes the imp or the monster that everyone thinks he is.
Yeah.
Gotcha. I mean, he's already kind of done that. It just he hasn't done so while holding any political power.
I feel there will be a point that will pull Tyrion out of this being the monster moment, but that will only come, I think, in A Dream of Spring or much later, not even in Winds.
Gosh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
I feel like he has to be pulled out of it soon or killed. Otherwise, it'll just get too.
Well, you do see him dance. He is, or no, that is right. Dance. He is pulling himself out of his depression, and so he's reaching a point where he is competent. But I think for a Winds of Winter, he's going to be competent but villainous.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense if he's more Maegor, Malus the Monstrous-esque.
Well, yeah, indeed. I think his departure from King's Landing felt like a betrayal, at least for him anyway. All he's tried to work towards was just taken away, and everyone was kind of okay with him losing his head. So yeah, he might transform into, I truly don't give a damn anymore, and I'm just going to look out for me, which, would be interesting to see that face off with a very composed and cunning Cersei, and not just cunning, but established in power that she's earned, not one that she's kind of, had to jostle for, but the one true, or not one true, but the actual queen with power and no rivals, and firmly seated in her own accomplishments. That would be nice to see. It will be a nice contrast to what we have now, I think.
I do feel that Cersei's trajectory is not long for this world, though. I think we will see the end of her in Winds of Winter. And I only see Tyrion getting back to Westeros in Dream. I could be wrong.
I mean, I pretty much agree. I agree that I kind of expect Cersei to be dead by the end of Winds, and then I expect Dany and then presumably Tyrion with her to. I expect Winds to kind of end with Dany and Tyrion landing on Westeros.
So how do you think Cersei's going to die, or who's going to kill her?
No idea. There's
who can only be one person.
Right. Yeah. I don't expect Tyrion to be the one to kill her for sure. So, but it's too besides the obvious Jaime, it's too unpredictable to say for sure how I think that's going to go down. Although I could see, a second Aerys, parallel with Cersei trying to blow up parts of King's Landing and Jaime killing her to stop her. It's a possibility, but it's certainly not the only one.
Yeah.
Sorry, Wilson, go on, mate.
Thanks. It's if Cersei is not going to become someone of substance, then at least her death should have some kind of, severe consequence for everything. Because she has been kind of in the middle of it since day one. Her departure should shake things up, very, very significantly, I think. And it really could go any way. I'm trying to block out the show in my mind and just take the Cersei that we've seen in the books. And it really could go any way, I think. So.
I can't see her dying in Winds personally.
Me neither.
I just don't think it can in the story. I mean, obviously, she's such a big character, and I think that will see her through the book. But also, I mean, it just can't. Yeah, it wouldn't feel right. I mean, she's going to have an interaction with young Griff and John Connington, and I don't think that's going to be what kills her. I don't think. Obviously, we'll get to Sansa. I don't think that could be something that would threaten her if she raises the veil and Winterfell. So I'm just finding it. Beyond maybe Euron, I don't see any real threat to her imminently.
Let me.
We have the prophecy.
I guess let me then backtrack a little bit. Where number one, that assumption is that thought of mine is based on the assumption that the series will end with book 7. And therefore, if it does go to book 8, then yes, I can understand Cersei being alive and to dream. And then the other thing is, I think a possible way for her to die is if young Griff and John Connington take King's Landing in Winds. If that's also delayed till spring, then I think for sure then Cersei would still be alive, probably.
Well, true. Yeah, I think she'll live long enough to at least dream of spring, and then everyone dies there.
Yeah, perhaps this is me projecting onto George that I hope he gets more efficient with his storytelling and moving the plot forward and wins. All right, I think we should kind of move on. Depends on where you guys want to go.
Should we? I think. Sorry, mate. I think we should. A few characters that pop up around Cersei. You know, some of the smaller ones that we may have.
Yeah, that was going to be my question. Do you want to move on to a different? Yeah, do you want to move on to a different POV, or do you want to discuss the Faith now?
Yeah, let's do the stuff around Cersei. Probably makes more sense.
Yeah, Kingsgrave characters.
Yeah, because the Faith is a fascinating plotline, and this story, and so people like Marjorie and the High Septon are two characters we get a lot of, but I'm hoping to find out more about them. The High Septon in particular, I'm really curious as to what his motivations and goal is going to end up being.
Do you think? I mean, I don't buy into any of the secret identities with him. I think he's just some commoner, who's risen. Despite it being, it would be funny if it was Hal and Reed, but I don't buy into that at all.
No, that would make me throw the book across the room and not pick it up.
Yeah, and I think it fits into the theme, of Feast with just showing the atrocities that have been committed onto the small folk, and so I think it works that one of them decides to stand up and fight back in a way that he knows how, and so I think he's just some guy, and that he's kind of he's going for a populist uprising of sort. It'd just be interesting to see as to, I guess, how is he going for French Revolution style purges, or something a little more peaceful.
So before the Targaryens came to Westeros, it was 7 kingdoms, loads of different kings, right? What was the Faiths? Would they probably were? I mean, had a lot more sway.
They had the Faith Militant, which was active in all of the kingdoms, but at the north, presumably.
Yeah, the Faith Militant, I think, was essentially a mode of defense to help defend the regular citizens who were often caught up in minor squabbles between kings and petty lords and all that. So It sort of acted like a third party judiciary, or some form of protection, so that they're not just being used completely. But yeah, I think that was one of the main purposes of the Faith Militant. I mean, obviously it was selfish of them. They provide this protection, in order to have political power and influence. But it was still a form of protection.
So then his final step would be to depose the current regime.
I think if he finds an alternative, like Aegon, who has been, faith educated and looks like this really good alternative, this is just my ideas, that he's going to be like, ooh, I want this guy. This is the person we have been waiting for, as he says in The Feast for Crows. We were waiting for the time to be right before we give our blessing to the king.
Yeah, my sense is that he's not looking to completely destroy the government. He's just trying to return to the old status quo between the faith and the crown that started, at the beginning of the Targaryen reign.
Well, this guy, he's too rigid. Like this High Septon, I don't know if any king or queen would live up to his standards of piety. So much so that, I mean, I can't think of anyone. The Targaryens or this Aegon kid. I mean, it's just hard to see. Maybe he is one of the common folk just trying to, burn things down. Because truly, the common folk are the ones who suffer when the kings fight. And so much so that we who are trying to guess his identity, we wonder if he's truly some great lord, because, we're so used to the high and mighty, the powerful people pulling all the strings and making all the important plays. And this guy comes out of nowhere, and all of a sudden he can galvanize an entire city to lock up 2 queens, not just one. If he is just a common folk, then this is maybe they do, bring down Cersei. Maybe she won't survive. I don't know. It doesn't seem like there's a point to it. He's just out to bring down these high and mighty lords.
Yeah, I like that. Sounds good. It reminds me of how Sir Quentin Bull died, and he was just shot by some common man before before the
Battle of Redgrass Field.
Yeah, that. Just some common man. I like that idea.
Now, to counter that, here's a crackpot theory I thought of. Crazy time coming. But the High Septon, when Dany is talking to Sir Barristan, and he asks about her mother, or she asks about her mother, and if she ever loved anyone, and he alludes to the fact that there was one person, and she says who? He's like, you wouldn't remember him, but once she turned him down, he became super pious. Right away, I thought, maybe it's this guy. And now that Targaryens are gone and the realm is going to hell, he's like, okay, these Lannisters and Baratheons, I'm gonna teach them a lesson and come back. But that's just a crazy.
I think that's
that
Harrenhal.
Yeah,
that's
it's
Hasty. Yes, the Holy Hundred.
So we know of his whereabouts. He is currently holding Harrenhal, and he has an interaction with Jaime in A Feast for Crows.
Who is this now?
Sir Boniface Hasty? I can't remember his last name.
Oh, Hastings. He's the one, you think? Or has this been
Yes. I think this is...
No, we know that for a fact.
Okay, well then someone please kindly edit my my conspiracy out of this mess, because I honestly thought I was onto something there, but obviously not.
Mate, by complete coincidence, I literally was reading that about Sir Boniface Hasty on Westeros just the other day. I had no idea either.
Yeah, no, it came up in the reread. It was in one of the
it was. You're right.
The reread cast I was on, and so that's when I looked him up and found out who he was.
Okay, well, consider me sorted. Thank you.
We all have our shocking lack of knowledge, here and there.
Yep.
Can we talk a little bit about Cersei's small council, maybe? Some of the valiant men on
the smallest council.
Maybe Aurane Waters, because I don't really think. I think this is kind of the only time we see him. He's not in dance, is he?
He is.
No, he's bucked off by the time of dance. He's mentioned in the Winds preview chapters.
Yeah, the Lord of the Waters. But yeah, does anyone... I've always viewed this as pretty open and shut, like he's gone off to be a pirate and that's it. He saw that Cersei was doomed. Does anyone have any theories on that he's gone to Stannis or whatever?
Don't know, I could see him being sort of like Doran's guy on the small council.
You think so? I mean...
Well, who else is there? Like Losby's not very likely, and... if Qyburn is, then why did he not know about the mountains? So only really leaves him.
I can't see Doran going to any of Cersei's former small council members. These are all tainted individuals. If Doran ever gets close to King's Landing.
Or didn't he say that he has someone on the small council? Or do you think he was just bullshitting that?
No, he didn't specify. He has sources in King's Landing. He didn't specify. He didn't specify as to how high they were.
Never mind.
I feel like his source is what's the eunuch's name again? Varys. I think that's his source. Not to think too far into it. How else would he know? I don't even think members of the small council knew about what he uncovered. What his sources told him about Cersei's plan for him. So it feels like it points to Varys, or someone who would know things that even people in King's Landing wouldn't know. Definitely not Waters, and definitely not Qyburn.
Yeah, you're probably right. Although Varys is probably acting through an intermediary, but he's Doran probably doesn't realize the information's coming from Varys, but that does make sense.
So I really thought that Qyburn in A Feast for Crows, we really got to know him. He was probably one of the more interesting characters to emerge. I really enjoy the dual faces that Qyburn has of being this kindly grandfather and then being It's not like he doesn't even get off on torturing people. He just likes it for the science. And that's interesting.
Yeah. I wonder if he, I don't know what his angle would be, or if he has a motive, or if he's just, a really passionate scientist who doesn't care about people. But he's definitely one of those that could, have a big impact. Well, he has already had a big impact on the story. But I wonder where it ends for his relationship with Cersei. Just thinking past Feast, I guess, he's still there, but like, in what way will he be relevant to the way things move on?
I wonder if it's a sort of Werner von Braun sort of situation where after Cersei's defeated, he ends up captured by one of other teams and he helps them.
I think, I wonder in what capacity, though. Like, he definitely is no match. He's no substitute for Varys. Varys knew things and was very, machinacious in his, he had a lot going on. Qyburn just seems like he's loyal to Cersei and that's it, because she lets him do his, experiments and things like that.
Well, with Werner von Braun, I was speaking more more zombies, like a zombie giant this time. See if he can scale it.
I feel like his fate is very much tied up with Cersei and his experiments and Sir Robert Strong. So I don't feel like he has any future beyond when that fails.
Well,
yeah, but I mean, they're not likely to kill him or anything. They would just be more inclined to just be like, all right, you're no longer on the small council. Thank you for your service or whatnot. And I mean, yeah, he's no comparison to Varys, but he's a better master of whispers than anyone else who's available. So we'll see. But yeah, he'll probably look for a way to continue his experiments. But I don't see anything negative happening to him immediately. Besides, maybe getting kicked off the small council, but I'm sure there'll be some more interesting stuff down the road with Gregor and whatnot.
Do you think he's working up to something bigger than just Sir Robert Strong? Because when he gets all these, volunteers, quote unquote, for his experiments, it seems like he's trying to accomplish something bigger. Or maybe it was just Robert Strong he was trying to, create. But
yeah, that's why I associate him with Werner von Braun, because of how the V1 and the V2 were just sort of like experiments to try and get to the moon, like just figuring out how rocket physics works.
I feel like those volunteers that he received and the knowledge he gained from experimenting on them was instrumental in being able to reanimate Sir Robert Strong, because seemingly he didn't have this ability beforehand.
Right.
True.
Yeah, but there has to be some like final product he's looking for. So yeah, maybe it is just some sort of kind of the classic immortality type thing. I wonder what would happen if he met Euron.
They'd get along. They'd have a nice conversation in a bar.
That might be an interesting way to go with it, is to have them interact.
They have mutual interests, these guys.
Yeah.
I mean, Euron would torture the shit out of him and use him for some spell after the drink. But yeah, they'd have a nice chat.
Yeah. If Euron is going to be someone quite significant, and he's sailing towards King's Landing now, right? Or no?
No. Yeah. He's sailing for Old Town.
Yeah, he's gonna attack Old Town first. That's his first major target, is Old Town and the Red Wine Fleet.
Mm.
Oh, I see. I guess that is to become, or so he becomes the dominant force on the seas, right?
Certainly in the West, yeah.
I mean, yeah, he already is. Like, no one. Well, I guess you're right. Yeah. If he defeats Red Wine, which he probably will somehow, then yeah, they're pretty much the dominant sea force.
All right.
Yeah. Sorry, mate.
Oh no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, going back to Qyburn, do you think his motivations are surrounding, his experiments and knowledge? Because on going through him in prep for this, he's the one who suggests that prophecy can be forestalled. Obviously, because that's what Cersei wants to hear. But he says that if she kills the younger queen, so do you think he has some sort of target in mind there? Obviously, Marjorie's Cersei's target initially.
Yeah, I think that's just to please Cersei or to looking out for Cersei. You're afraid of this kid and kill her, because he has no qualms about killing. He has no
Yeah,
qualms about killing young ladies. He's actually pro that. So I don't know that he has some kind of agenda when it comes to the Tyrells or anyone else. I think a Queen Cersei is a secure, it's job security for him, and so that's where that's what I think. Reading chapters he's in, he just doesn't seem to have anything bigger in mind.
Yeah, I mean his advice to Cersei just seems like what he would do in that scenario, and just it shows more of his line of thinking, where he's all about cold scientific rationality. So he's just like, so yeah, of course he wouldn't believe in prophecy, and then he finds the easiest solution, which is just kill her. So yeah, I don't think that says that he has some, I don't know, higher mysterious goal related to that.
I feel like he's most interesting as a character if he's just doing this for the science.
Yes.
As an evil scientist, as Frankenstein, basically. That's what he is.
Right, yeah, or Mengele, if we're more sinister about him.
But thinking back, when we first meet him and Jaime's trying to figure out who he is, someone makes a statement, I can't remember who it is, who says Qyburn just wants his chain back. He thinks Tywin Lannister will give him his chain back, his maester's chain. It's like he's trying to head back to the Citadel, or maybe he does have either a grievance with Old Town or something along those lines. But you wonder why he's attached himself to the Lannisters. Maybe it's for that reason, or it could just be that he's a crazy scientist. But I don't know.
Yeah, you're right on that one. Where part of his scientific motivation is to prove the people of the Citadel wrong and to show them that his experiments were legit.
He's speaking of maesters, he's Marwyn was the only one sympathetic to his experiments, right?
His idea on if a part of your spirit remains in this world. I mean, I don't want to say Marwyn's a saint or anything, but I don't think Marwyn said, do your experiments, they're great. But he likes Qyburn's ideas, I think.
Yeah, it would be good to see more of Marwyn. I feel like this was maybe like the book of the maesters almost, with Aemon, Marwyn, Qyburn kind of taking center stage in certain portions of the story.
Yeah, it's I don't know what relevance they're not the Septons are not Septons. I'm sorry, the Maesters are part of the university, while the Septons are part of the Faith, right? So
yeah,
I wonder what designs the scholars have for Westeros. If they are truly, they are anti-dragon and anti-Valyrian sorcery, whatnot. But Qyburn and Marwyn seem to be pro that, because Marwyn is heading to Daenerys and Qyburn is here in King's Landing. I wonder if they will clash, or maybe they have the same kind of purpose where a little magic is not bad as long as it's all for it's all put to good use, I guess. But that would be interesting to see what roles they play behind the big pushers. I hope Marwyn gets to Daenerys, and that makes a difference with her council and such. And Qyburn here, if Cersei is to survive, maybe he does offer some wisdom that she will listen to, as opposed to just creating Robert Strong. That'll be interesting, I think.
Yeah, I think Qyburn is one of the few people left that Cersei can go to for advice and assistance.
This is horrible, but I can't even remember anyone else on the small council, on Cersei's small council, besides Qyburn, who, maybe puts a notion here and there. All the others just seem like background noise to Cersei's eventual, spiral down. Like, they're all gone now at the end of Feast, aren't they? Like, they all skedaddle.
There's only...
I think
Harry Swift, who serves as the Hand. And actually, this was a point I wanted to make in the questions, is that, so he is the Hand of the King. And obviously, what the point of him being the Hand of the King is to show that Cersei just wants yes men that are weak to do what she wants. That's obviously a running theme in A Feast for Crows. But when you compare him to the previous Hands of the Kings that we've had of Tyrion, Ned, and Tywin, I feel like this is a big void, and I'm not sure how this affects Feast for Crows, just having the Hand of the King be such a non-factor after he's been so big in the other books. What do you guys think of this?
Well, it's because that void is filled by Cersei. Like it just happened to be that all the rulers in King's Landing were mainly the Hands of the King, because here the king was like Robert and didn't give a fuck, or was a child. So they became the de facto rulers. So Cersei is just taking that place as a de facto ruler. So
that's good. She is the de facto Hand of the King.
Yeah, I didn't really agree with your assessment that it was a void, where I thought that void was filled.
I think it's one of Cersei's blunders where she dismisses the position as something she doesn't need, because I think she makes a statement that says, or she says something to the fact that a weak ruler needs a strong hand, and she's a strong ruler, so she puts Swift. When she had her choice of Kevin and even Randall Tarley was put to her as a possibility. I mean, any of these could have helped her make them yours, I think was what Kevin said when he was counseling her. But she puts them all aside. If she had one of those people on her side, I think Cersei would have been in good shape. But Harry Swift as her hand, maybe one of her blunders, perhaps. And he did nothing. Like when she got arrested, a strong hand would have done something, I think.
The problem with all that is that if she had named a stronger hand, that hand would have eventually taken power from her.
Or just disagreed with her ideas, which is not what Cersei wants to hear.
I guess, but it's right. But it's all based on her fear that she would have lost power to the hand, and she's right because the man, like whoever the man was, he's still a man, and he would have assumed that power should rightfully go to him.
Well,
that's right.
Kevin was. Sorry, mate.
Oh no, go ahead.
Well, no, because when he asked, but when she asked Kevin said, "Yeah, I'll do it if you go back to Casterly Rock."
I feel like that was a Kevin-only proposition because Kevin finally realized what a piece of work Cersei was. Like, I do understand having a strong hand is going to dilute your absolute power, but as Queen Regent, Cersei is still on top.
I mean, maybe, but like...
Well, it is one of her fears. You're right. She says it. She says, I think in one of the, she says, why do men always feel the need to correct her? When Tywin spoke, people did what he said, but whenever she spoke, they always felt the need to counsel her or tell her what to do. So maybe that's that insecurity led her to dismiss Kevin. You're right, but maybe she could. Well, no, Randall Tarley. Now that we know more about him, he would have been a disaster with Cersei because he is very, very rigid, very chauvinist in his views and power. So I guess Cersei had no choice.
The other one recommended by Kevin was Mathis Rowan, who's just he comes across as like a sensible guy.
Yeah, he would probably be the best choice for her. He seems sensible and not really that much not really power hungry.
I disagree. I think Kevin definitely would have been the best choice, and she's missed a lot of lessons from Tywin. Who used Kevin and used people and listened to people. People listened to him when he made a command, but if you see early in Game of Thrones, Tywin's silent in the discussions with his generals. But perhaps again, that's something Cersei was never exposed to. Like Tyrion picks it up quite quickly and uses some of these tactics in understanding, in hearing everyone's opinion and stuff when he's in council, and perhaps it's something Cersei wasn't privy to.
I do think that line by Cersei, is a misinterpretation by her on what power entails. Like Tywin, Ned, Jaime, they all let people speak first, and Cersei's idea on what absolute power means is just wrong. You have to listen to your advisors.
For sure. My only point was that Tywin and Kevin's previous relationship and dynamic was unique to them because of their familial ties.
I do agree that Kevin would have been the best choice, but Kevin was not offering himself as a choice. It was, you have to go, Cersei. I'm not going to just be your hand. I'm going to be both the hand and the regent.
Well, that's true. He did say that. Maybe that it justifies her fear, or at least for us readers, that indeed she would have been sidelined if she had chosen someone like that. Because he did say, take yourself back to Casterly Rock.
I did forget that, actually, yeah.
Yeah, she's only Queen Regent. Her power derives from Tommen, so I get her insecurity in that. It's not hers. She's not the lord of anything. She's only there because she's the king's mother. And so it is a battle for her to establish that. And fighting a strong hand would have been, I don't know. I think that threat was imminent for her, having lived in King's Landing all this while with all these powerful men who, decided her fate. So
well, she would inherit Casterly Rock, surely. That wouldn't go to Kevin. That would be hers.
Well, that is true. He asked her to name him Castellan, which I guess suggests that she is the rightful Lord of Casterly Rock, since Tyrion is attainted.
Jaime's in the Kingsguard.
Yeah, that is true. I keep looking for reasons to sympathize with Cersei, but each time, dude, she misses the mark. It's very unfortunate.
Yeah, I mean, Casterly Rock would go to her probably until, I guess, yeah, with Tommen being king, obviously it would then go to her sons, but then Tommen's king, so it doesn't go to him. So yeah, I guess she would be.
It would go to Marcella, maybe.
Right. Yeah. Right. It would go to Marcella's husband, is what it would do. That's kind of the final outcome, probably.
I think the inheritance of Casterly Rock is always meant to be this nebulous void that's never quite decided upon. Yeah.
That is true.
If she went to Casterly Rock, we'd have got to see the bloody thing through someone's eyes.
George says we'll see it.
It's one of those places that sounds awesome, and it would be great to see it.
Yeah.
I mean, Tywin waxed a lot of power from Casterly Rock in the interim between Robert's Rebellion and him becoming Hand.
Do you think that's realistic, though? That's always struck me as something that's a little bit, I don't know, potentially bad writing, like just seeing how King's Landing operates with people like Varys and Littlefinger there, and it feels like you have to be on the ground controlling a network of whisperers, getting information, reacting real time. It always struck me that I know that his power is through writing letters and forging alliances and doing shady dealings, but isn't there just an information disadvantage to being out west for so long?
Some people have suggested that Tywin is de facto exiled from King's Landing because of what he did in the sack. And so this is their way of, he's not part of the small council. He obviously gets his daughter to be the queen, but he's not officially welcome at court for his actions.
He certainly wouldn't have, he probably didn't have that much influence over the court itself, but the various wardens pretty much have, they're pretty much the local government in their area, and they have pretty major control over that.
Yeah, but that's different for being influential and knowing anything about what's happening at court.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, I think maybe in Tywin's instance, people would definitely try and curry favor with him by maybe trading information.
I almost feel like Tywin's power did not come from being a politician. It came more from being just the lord of this vast, area with a large army that has, a tight grip on power.
Wealth as well.
Yeah. So, I don't think he would have needed to, or maybe even wanted to, accept just because he had to keep up with what was going on in King's Landing. I just think Tywin being him in the Westerland with a secure area and this power and might and money made him consequential. And so he wielded that power from Casterly Rock, fine. I don't know if he took part in the Greyjoy rebellion put down. I know Jaime did, and his bannerman, but I don't remember if anyone mentioned Tywin being an active part besides Lannisport getting burnt. But he's still like the big army to reckon with, I think. It sounds like anyway. So.
I'm sure he was involved, but he always led from the back. He was never the charge-in type guy.
I think if Cersei was the Lady of Casterly Rock, she could have wielded that same power. You know, maybe her staying in King's Landing, I think, was her kid, her son being the king. Maybe, you know, that was part of her. That was her immediate concern. Otherwise, what Kevin suggested would have worked, kind of. You know, she would have been powerful in her own right, and her son would be the king with an able hand. But she didn't want to leave her son, I don't think. Maybe.
No, especially after the loss of Joffrey. There's no way she would ever let Tommen
And
be.
it's not the top job. It's a lesser position.
Well, true. And I think maybe she was scared leaving, well, not scared, but didn't want to leave him with Marjorie and all the other schemers, perhaps. It's just unfortunate. It would have been a different story if she had, you know, or if there were people enough on her side to kind of make her feel secure enough. But that was not the case.
Okay, so as usual with Vok, we have gone on number of tangents and have been talking for a while now. So we're going to separate this out into a few parts. We'll close this part here with the end of the Cersei and King's Landing discussions, and then the next part we'll move on to Sansa and Arya and a little bit of Arianne thrown in the middle there, and then the third part will be Brienne and the Greyjoys to kind of wrap it up, our discussion. Thank you all for joining me for part one.
Thank you for hosting, Matt. That was really fun. I really enjoyed listening to that discussion. It was good.
Yeah.
No problem.
Thanks, Matt.
Ryan, thanks for coming on here.
Bye, guys.
See you.
All right. Take care.
Bye.